Thank you everyone for joining the webinar on the impact of the coronavirus crisis on South Asian immigration. My name is Rohit Kumar, and I'm the 2020 SABANY Pro Bono Clearinghouse Coordinator. Before we begin, please note that a recorded version of this webinar will be available on the SABANY website, sabany.org, and members are encouraged to post the link to the webinar or the SABANY website on their social media pages. Also, since this current session is being recorded, please make sure to have your microphones on mute so that we can avoid any unnecessary noise. We have allotted some time for a question and answer session for the end of the webinar. Therefore, I would really appreciate it if everyone can hold their questions till that time. I would now like to introduce our three panelists today, Ms. Pallvi Babbar, Ms. Neena Dutta, and Ms. Hamel Vyas. Ms. Babbar is a principal attorney and owner of Babbar Law and represents clients in various legal issues. She has extensive experience in immigration law. She also has an unwavering commitment to her community and has provided extensive pro bono and public services throughout her legal career. Ms. Dutta is a principal attorney and owner of the Dutta Law Firm PC. Her focus is on corporate immigration and represents a wide variety of employers who wish to sponsor individuals and teams of employees, advising them on various business-related immigration matters, including retention of foreign nationals in the United States and I-9 audits. She serves as a member of the Board of Governors for the American Immigration Lawyers Association. Ms. Vyas is an Associate Dean, International Personnel at the Mount Sinai Health System. She has practiced for over 20 years and brings a wealth of information and experience to the field. She has also served as SABANY's Vice President and Chair of the Advocacy Committee and is a member of the American Immigration Lawyer Association. Ms. Vyas has spoken on numerous immigration panels and has also written on various immigration topics. Finally, our moderator is Ms. Roli Khare Rastogi. Ms. Khare Rastogi is a principal attorney and the owner of the law office of Roli Khare Rastogi LLC. Prior as co-founder of Baso and Khare, and now in her current position, she strives to develop a premier law firm focused on all aspects of immigration and the legal needs of businesses, startups, and nonprofit organizations. She has served as SABANY Pro Bono Coordinator for over 5 years prior to that. I want to thank all our panelists for joining us today. Roli, handing it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to thank you, Rohit, for SABANY for hosting us. I think it's a great honor to be able to serve our community in this way. We had obviously realized that COVID is going to impact every part and every facet of our society, but most importantly for what we do as our daily bread and butter, it's immigration, we knew that it would have compounding effects on our community. And so, we're also keeping up with the new daily developments, hourly developments in immigration. And we decided to create this short webinar to get the information out to the people. I think it's really important that if you're able to work, if you're in a community-based organization, that you're able to reach your own constituents and you're able to explain these rapidly changing developments to your constituents in an easily understandable format. And that's why we're doing this more as a question and answer format. We've got a great lineup of panelists. So if you do have a question for something that you do hear one of the speakers saying, if you could just type it into the chat for us. And once we get towards the end of our remarks, we will compile those questions and answers and we'll field it to our panelists today. As you know, this, as I mentioned, this is all rapidly evolving. So what we're having is an evolving conversation. Things may change, so we will be posting resources that will be updated. And so I encourage you all to reach out to those resources. And please, if you are in a situation where you do need advice, it's really important to consult an immigration attorney. We're happy to recommend immigration attorneys. We will also provide our own contact information, but each case is very individual. And so we would really caution everybody to really reach out to a qualified immigration attorney to get the best advice possible. So now we're going to turn it over. We're going to actually break it up in terms of first giving updates. And so I'd like to turn it over to, I believe it's Hamel, who will give us a first update on what USCIS is doing.
Actually, I think it's Neena that's going
But Hamel and I can bounce off each other. So, one of the biggest things that people are concerned about right now, USCIS, of course, governs your status in the US, any applications, and whether you're extending your status or your status is running out. One of the biggest constituents, I think, that are having issues is typically the people who came from visa waiver countries. So also known as the VWP. And the reason why that's a little more sticky is, generally speaking, you cannot change your status or extend your status if you came here on the visa waiver program. Now, usually that doesn't apply to Indian nationals, but there's many countries, you know, the individuals may be of Indian descent, but may have come from other countries. So if you have someone who has came here on the visa waiver program, you have to request satisfactory departure in order to extend their status. And that is so that they will not violate the visa waiver program and they won't fall out of status. Typically, this is governed by CBP, Customs and Border Protection, but in these cases, we are actually being asked to approach USCIS and request that directly from USCIS. So the best way of going about it is, unfortunately, calling the 1-800 number. I know everybody hates to do that, but that's the first step. The contact service center, so the contact representative will ask a couple of questions. If you're representing someone, make sure they're on the phone, because there's no way you're going to have a G28 on there. So you'll have to make sure that whoever is requesting it is actually there and present. You have to give them the date and place that they entered. The reason for asking for satisfactory departure, it's not enough just to say COVID. You know, you have to say, my status is expiring, the country that I'm going to, there's an issue once they reach there, and also, you know, if they're in a vulnerable community, you know, if they're elderly and they don't want to be on a plane for a long time, that would be a reason. Once the contact center gets that, they'll forward it to a field office. So if you're an AILA member, go to the COVID resource page. There's detailed instructions on step-by-step how to do this, much more succinct than I just went over. So talking of field offices, so field offices are where you would typically go for your interviews, biometrics. One of the big things, of course, is the field offices are closed. If you practice in the New York, New Jersey area, you might have heard like Newark was unfortunately one of the first places to be closed because there was actually an officer who had tested positive. So as attorneys, if you are receiving notices, it's very important to keep on top of those notices, because even though this is a state of emergency, there is still, you know, people getting RFEs. There's still the issue of, you know, if you don't respond, it will still, we think, be held against your client. So you've really got to, unfortunately, stay on top of it. Something that my office is doing is to just make sure that anything you submit, any email, just, you know, if you do anything online, you know, a service request, take screenshots, print, whatever you can, just to have proof that you did your utmost to make sure that everything was correct.
It's so important to document everything. I agree, Neena.
Hugely, hugely so. And apologies because they chose right now to vacuum the hallway in my building. So let me know, because I can always bounce it off to another speaker and I can put myself on mute. So if you can still hear me, service centers. So service centers are at a much lower staffing, which it wasn't great to begin with. So here we are. As far as we know, last week, Vermont was closed for a few days. There was someone that tested positive there, but you can still file cases. You are still able to file your adjustments, extensions, etc. Just know that it's still, again, you'll have to keep on top of it. I have seen cases that attorneys have said, like their FedEx, they were tracking their FedEx and it wasn't getting delivered, or you know, they couldn't get that confirmation. Again, keep a really good record of your FedEx or UPS, whatever delivery method you select. Make sure you have good records of that, because it's going to be, I think, on us to prove that you made the utmost effort to file on time, to get all the information in. But as far as we know, people are still getting approval notices, they're still getting RFEs. So there are people working, and the same goes, not to bounce back, but to the field offices. So even though they're not conducting interviews and they're not able to capture biometrics at the moment, there is still people in the field offices, because I know that, like, I've had a couple where we sent follow-ups in, or they were requested medicals and they seem to have waived interviews, or there was an interview a while back and they're issuing approvals. So that's at least a positive.
Neena,
yeah, go ahead.
Neena, two quick questions there. So as of right now, all interviews will be postponed, obviously, so does the client need to proactively reach out to USCIS to reschedule their interview, or that's something done by USCIS?
No, that's going to be by USCIS. However, once it opens up and people don't get notices, it's really important. A really good way, honestly, where it's sort of minimal bugging is using the e-inquiry and obtaining a number through that, because you get a case number that's automatically generated. You know, there's a paper trail. So to answer your question, no, because we don't want to overwhelm the system. However, they are not shy about denying people who they say they've sent notices to. So it's kind of a balance.
Right.
You know, I think keep reminders in the calendar, but at the same time, don't be, you know, super annoying.
Right. Last question is medicals. Some clients have said that they need to get medical exams at this time. Are you advising that clients even reach out to USCIS medical examiners and try to get these exams done right now?
I'm actually telling people not to. So there's two things. Actually, you've just reminded me. So there are two things in filing adjustment of statuses that typically you would submit: medical and like the passport size photographs. I'm telling people, you know, don't submit it and just put it in your cover letter, because one, there's no one taking passport size photographs right now, and two, a lot of the civil surgeons are actually closed and they're not taking those cases anyway. So it's actually very difficult to get a, and I don't know if you guys have found the same, but it's, as far as I know, I mean, because it's not essential, it's not emergent.
Right.
So
passport photos, people have had luck with Walmart online services.
Yeah.
But for medical, there's very, very few civil surgeons that are.
Absolutely. And it's also, I mean, you know, if there's even one denial, well, you know, we should sue, because that is a direct, first of all, it's a direct contradiction to states that have a lockdown rule, because it is not essential. So the other thing you reminded me of as well is, generally speaking, for USCIS, you have to submit wet signatures on any forms. This is the first time they're allowing scanned. However, if you represent an employer, or if you have a very tech-savvy client who gets very excited and DocuSigns, they will not accept DocuSign signatures. It has to be like literally a wet signature. If you have a client that doesn't have a scanner at home, or most of everyone has a smartphone, So I've actually submitted a few that were photos of forms. Yeah.
You should also have those forms available in original form after the fact to produce in case.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Also, I mean, there are some scanning apps where you can use your phone to take a picture, but it comes out like a scan. But, you know, to keep it simple, you know, they are allowing non-original signatures, just not DocuSign.
Got it. I'm going to move the conversation on agency updates up to Pallvi. Pallvi will give us a brief update on ICE and what's going on with EOIR.
Yes. So basically, like everyone's been saying, we're in unprecedented times. We're going to hear this line a million times. Things are changing constantly. As of right now, there are certain situations where you have to worry about ICE. As far as we've been told, they're not actively going out and looking for people anymore because of this is going on. But if you do have to check in with an ICE officer, if you do have, there are people who are in proceedings that are required to check in regularly with their ICE officers. But we're saying do not go in to check in as it's not safe. And just if you have an attorney, ask your attorney to send in a letter explaining that because of the COVID-19, you're not coming in to check in and that you will check in as soon as it is safe to do so. If you don't have an attorney, you can try to draft this letter yourself. It's very basic and it's to be sent to the ICE officer and hopefully it gets into the right hands. Like I said, I don't think that they're going to penalize anyone, and if they do, that would be a huge lawsuit that would be happening afterwards. Detained cases are still proceeding. They're being done by teleconference. If you have a family member who is detained and you did not have an attorney, now is the time to get one. It's really going to be very difficult to handle something like that without an attorney at this point. I know that SABANY said that they're going to put up, they always have resources on their website as well, but I believe with this video, we're planning to put up resources where we have attorneys who will do pro bono, lo bono, and help people in that situation. And, you know, just in general, even though they're saying that they're not actively looking for people to detain, always be smart about it. If you're stopped by an ICE officer, you know, kind of don't say much, ask for an attorney, speak to an attorney, and try to get out of there as quickly as possible.
Pallvi, just also, has ICE revised the process of filing the application for a stay of deportation of removal yet?
Not as of yet. They have not done anything with that.
And many of our clients or constituents may need to know how to pay a bond. Has ICE made any adjustments to this payment process?
Well, I mean, bonds are always payable by check or money orders as well. That's the best option, is sending them in and continuing with that. There hasn't been any real changes as of right now.
Excellent.
There aren't many updates.
Got it. Next, we're going to move over to Hamel, who will give us an update on Department of State and consular processing visas.
Sure. So the Department of State has suspended routine visa services at all embassies and consulates until further notice. They are allowing emergency appointments for essential workers, and they define essential workers as healthcare workers, and applicants can call the local embassy to obtain an emergency appointment. They are running on a low staff. Obviously, you know, I'd strongly advise everybody to abstain from international travel. If you do choose to travel and you have an expired visa and your passport, it's unlikely you're going to be able to return to the United States without considerable delay. I have folks that have left the United States and they're working remotely from their home country. Some of them are eager to come back, but they're going to have to wait until the consulate will accommodate them and provide that emergency visa service to them. The Department of State, I would say, has been very, very accommodating. During the outbreak, you know, they've been taking steps to ensure that people that are here in the United States, for example, J1 researchers, they extended the status of anybody that was expiring between April 1st and May 30th for an additional 60 days so that they can remain in the United States because they're unable to return back home due to travel restrictions. And they're going to revisit that as 30 days prior to the expiration of that date. They had suspended all J1 programs for initial J1 applicants as of March 11th, and that was suspended for 60 days. So it's coming up for a renewal revisit to see what they will do depending on what's going on. There was a question about how state would consider public charge and COVID treatment. They haven't released any information of how they're going to handle that, or whether it's to be considered part of public charge or the totality of the circumstances, or even how unemployment benefits might impact applicants who are going to be processed at the embassy and the consulates. That's about it for state so far.
Roli, can I add something?
Absolutely.
Okay. According to my research, we've been told that as public charge will not apply to these benefits as long as you're able to prove that it was due to COVID-19. So if you were to lose your job and apply for unemployment benefits, you're going to have to keep a good relationship with your employer, because after all this is said and done, you're going to need some type of proof from them saying that they fired you because of the coronavirus, not because you were a bad employee or because it was employee at will and they just were ready to move on. So these are, again, standards that are being said. I don't know how it's going to end up working in practice, but if I feel like I've been telling my clients, if your back is up against the wall and you do need money to survive, it's there, it's an option, you're eligible for it. We can always fight that battle later on.
Yeah, and some of the feedback that I've been getting from government agencies is that they're not seeking to penalize anybody because of COVID. I feel that so far everyone's acting in good faith in that regard. So there may be some goodness.
Except DOL.
Yes.
Except DOL. DOL is the one agency that really is not helping. And that's important to Pallvi's point for H-1Bs in particular, because DOL determines the labor condition application maintenance. So Hamel, are you seeing that in practice?
In terms of
like, so if you have an LCA that's at, 1 First Street, someone starts working from home.
Right. The DOL FAQs have actually addressed that. And there's also some advocacy going on to get a much more clear statement from DOL. If they're in the same MSA, you don't necessarily need to file a new LCA. There's a conservative approach where employers are asking people to post that LCA at the employee's home, on their fridge. It's in a situation where everybody can see it. If employers have if they post their LCAs electronically, they can just update them on their employer website. So it's a sliding scale. The FAQs, I think they're in round 3 right now, or maybe round 4. Correct me, I'd have to double check. There have been many rounds of things but they do have FAQs that they're consistently updating. So hopefully we'll get a little bit more clarity on how they're going to actually manage those.
Okay.
Yeah. As far as like if someone gets furloughed, because this point is, I agree with Pallvi, we're sort of still debating this, but it's so important again to keep records. If the whole department, let's say, is furloughed, and you're on an H-1B, it is, and I'd love to hear from the other panelists, but it's my understanding that that's it. Like you can't bench someone. Like the old rules still apply. That it's going to be very difficult to just come back on to start working after the furlough. So I think it's going to be sort of another application, and no one can travel. so you can't even trigger. Hamel, would you agree with that, or
I'd agree with that for sure. It is one thing that I think it seems to be a consistent theme that we're all saying is document everything. Show the good faith, be able to show the good faith. There are many decisions that may be made on a Tuesday which have a different meaning on Friday or even the Wednesday after. And what I think would help, definitely is print out that government memo or that advisory that came and staple it to whatever decision you've made. Make copious notes to file that allows you to see, date stamp it so you can see what happened on Tuesday. Everybody was doing this. On Wednesday, we're doing this. So documenting and showing the good faith is incredibly important.
Okay, so I think what we're trying to do, just so we can stay on track for time, is that we're trying to get first agency updates. I think Neena's going to round out by giving us an update on Customs and Border Patrol. And then we're also going to touch upon business and family immigration topics, which I know a lot of our community have questions on. And we are going to be talking in as lay language as possible, because we understand that there are quite a few non-lawyers on there, and that's perfectly what we want to address too. So why don't we have Neena round out with the Custom and Border Patrol agency update, and then we'll move on to business visa updates.
Sure thing. So we already talked about satisfactory departure, and obviously there's a close nexus to USCIS and CBP in that instance, if someone's trying to prove that they're not overstaying. Now, I have heard instances where people have gone through USCIS and said, I need this satisfactory departure, and they're still not getting responses. In that instance, it would be prudent to then call secondary inspection. And so every airport, every major port has a secondary or deferred inspection unit, and you can find, if you go to the CBP website, you can find that number and you call them up and say, I was supposed to leave on April 25th. I didn't get the, USCIS did not allow me to leave, but, or they're telling me I'm supposed to leave, but it's not possible. These are the reasons. So communicating with them and making sure, again, you document that you did make efforts to do that. Now, on March 23rd, as we've said, like everything changes minute to minute. So like March 23rd was actually a month ago now. The northern and southern borders were closed. Just to give you guys an idea, like JFK typically sees, I think it's in the region of like 600,000 visitors a day or something like that. Like a week ago, they had 400. So the change is dramatic. I mean, the good news is it means that people are listening and they're not traveling. And, you know, there's definitely a greatly reduced service in flights. And so there aren't as many people coming. The only people who are allowed to travel are essential workers. So as Hamel mentioned, you know, healthcare workers would be up there. So I think especially in New York, we've seen a lot of people travel domestically, nurses and doctors and other healthcare support workers who have flown to New York to assist in the crisis.
But sorry, Neena, to cut you off, but what about folks that are maybe trying to go to visit a relative who might be, you know, ill in the ICU or anywhere in the world? Are they being allowed out or coming into the US?
So there's a couple things. People are being allowed to travel, but something that you have to keep in mind is most countries have, and depending on the sophistication of the country, they have a 14-day quarantine. Sometimes it's self-imposed. Sometimes, I mean, if you have a country like Taiwan, they'll stick something on your phone and they'll monitor you. And I don't think I'm telling anyone's story, but like I have heard of a gentleman who's like, forgot to charge his phone, and he was still within the first 14 days, and they showed up at his apartment, the police. So they're really monitoring people.
They're taking it very seriously.
Yes,
everywhere.
yes. No one's showing up at your house in the US, but I think that there's, there is going to be a real kind of, as much as you can travel, there is sort of like a mindfulness you need to engage in.
And the CDC announced today they're extending till May 20th, the Canadian and the Mexican borders, the travel restrictions, and then they did say in that memo, I haven't dug deep into it because it just came out today, that they are still asking for that 14-day quarantine. That also ties in, and I think, Neena, I think I cut you off, but I think the ESTA, the ESTA piece as well is if you're coming on ESTA, they expect you to have quarantine for 14 days, and there's that component of good faith if you can actually get here, but then there's a request for you to quarantine for another 14 days while you are here. So exactly. There's some checks and balances that are put in there. I know that at hospitals, if they ask you to call in every day in the morning, the afternoon, and the evening with your temperature as a form of monitoring. So there are different mechanisms of monitoring and expectation of people being good actors.
Yeah, so I see two relevant questions. So the travel restrictions apply to anyone who doesn't have a close enough tie to the US. So if you are a US citizen, but you were in perhaps a health watch, like a hotspot country, or you're a green card holder, you will still be allowed to travel back into the US. However, if you are unfortunately traveling at the time that this happened, and you have what they call a non-immigrant visa, H-1B, O-1, TN, E-3, anything that's temporary, and you're listening to this call, you're probably outside the US. It's people have not been able to travel.
Unless you're an essential worker.
Yes, that is correct. And so here's the catch-22. If it's petition-based and your visa has expired, you have to extend the petition first and then go back to the consulate. So for anyone who's not familiar on the call, for a lot of work visas, you have the approval notice that you get from a service center, and then you have to get a stamp in your passport in order for you to enter the country. So if the petition expires, you definitely have to get a stamp. And if the stamp expires, unfortunately, you have to extend the petition first and then get a stamp. But you can't get a stamp until they reopen the consulates. So anyone outside really has to be very careful. I mean, they're definitely going to be stuck outside. As far as green card holders who are outside, now, we took, Hamel and I, we were on a call with the port director for JFK. They are trying to be as accommodating as possible. So if you had an LPR who, let's say, was looking after someone, or for, it wasn't safe for them to travel, and they go over that 180 days, they just need to be able to tell the CBP officer as they arrive, look, this wasn't, I had fully intended to come back before. I, wasn't going to abandon. It's just I've overstayed, or I've stayed outside too long.
Yeah, it was beyond their control. So anything that's beyond their control, they're not going to be penalized for it. It's important to, as Neena said, when they do arrive and they are able to return, to make sure you have that conversation at the time of entry.
Yeah.
And this is also a good situation to reiterate what Neena was saying before about document everything. Getting, if you were taking care of someone, or if travel wasn't bad, collecting articles, newspaper articles, getting doctor's notes, all of that stuff.
Yeah. I want to move the conversation, if it's okay with you, Hamel. Just to clarify, though, when you talk about non-immigrant visas, Neena, you were also addressing fiancé visas, H-1B workers, L-1As. Everyone is outside until further notice, correct?
Yes, and I think there was a relevant question about the fiancé visa if, let's say, it got approved. So I think these are going to be on a case-by-case basis because it's not like an L1. You know, the fiancé visa, it's you don't have to prove you've got work. I mean, you're still going to be engaged. I think what's going to happen is it's going to be case-by-case. You know, it's going to be the consulate. The person might have to contact the consulate. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of discretion exercised whenever, I mean, unfortunately or fortunately, this is the first time something like this has happened in modern day. And as I said, state is very cognizant of this. They want to make sure, because if they don't, it's going to just create additional backlog for themselves. So as things start to come to the forefront, they are going to review all of these and perhaps come out with a policy or some metrics that you'll need to satisfy in order to show that it was COVID related, just to ensure, you know, everyone that had the intention of returning but couldn't do so, and that they're going to exercise the discretion. I'm quite certain of that. It's just a matter of when all of this will happen, when this is over.
And this is the perfect time to bring up, you know, just as we say, it's very easy to say document. I mean, like everyone's got their kids running around, you know, things are chaotic, but as much as you can, if you can either, you know, if you're representing yourself or you know, as much as you can, at least write down the story. And the reason why this is important as well is you may have to bring in congressional help. I think congressional offices are going to be really overwhelmed.
And they already are.
Yes, yeah. But you know, if you have your clear story, you have dates, you have times, you know, you have the succinct issue, they're going to be able to help you much, much quicker. And that, you know, they'll also be grateful for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, just in the interest of time, I think we're going to move into the business immigration. I know we had some questions from H-1B and H-4 visa holders. Are you able to address that, Neena or Hamel? If they lose their job,
why don't you tell us the questions and we'll...
So one of the questions we had was if an H-1B work visa holder gets laid off, they have to find another job within 60 days and forced to leave the country. What is happening in those situations when they're actually terminated from the job?
Go ahead, Emily.
So,
as an employer,
yeah, they actually have, you know, they have obviously the 60-day grace period to find another job. In this circumstance, it might be difficult to do so. Otherwise, they would have to leave the country. If they can't do so, the main thing is to maintain their status. So they would have to apply for a change of status to a visitor visa to sustain their status. It's also important to find out what their spouse's situation is. There might be a possibility to switch over to an H-4 if their spouse is on an H-1, so to allow them to stay during this time period. Folks that are filing for a change, so if they're unable to find a job, another H-1 job, some folks that you'd apply for a change of status to a visitor visa. Right now, the adjudications are also taking a while, and that may end up being 4 to 6 months until that's even approved, but it'll allow them to remain lawfully in the United States.
And how about the impact if companies reduce their employees' pay or hours, like if they're going on furlough, does that somehow negate the H-1B underlying status of any sort? Any views on that?
This is a tough one, I think. Yeah, because the individual doesn't have any control over this.
Right.
This is, you know, the company has complete control. So, you know, in a lot of cases, you've got a company is reducing hours by, you know, 20%. So they're working at 80% capacity. It really depends if they're on an H or if they're on an L1 or, you know, if it's outside of an LCA, a labor condition application, it's not as much of a concern. It's still a concern, but it's not as much. But the second you make a change where there's an LCA involved, there needs to be an amendment or a modification. Now, a lot of employers are going to say, like, why am I spending more money on now modifying this job? It's, you know, we're hoping that DOL and USCIS will be reasonable, but as of right now, it's status quo, right? Hamel, would you?
Yeah, you have to.
But what would you say? I mean, like, this could be, I think we were listening to another call where this would have been similar to somebody going on maternity leave or some other type of FMLA leave. So furlough could perhaps be justified in that manner as not necessarily a change in material conditions.
Right. So it all depends, you know, are they going on actual sort of full-time leave? You know, is everyone, you know, no longer working? There's also some jobs, I mean, let's say someone works in a lab, it's very difficult to work remotely in those instances.
Right.
Or if, you know, so it makes a difference also if the person is going to 0 hours or 80%.
Right, or reduced hours. And the reduced hours, you would have to file an amended LCA, labor condition application. And sometimes it's better to look at the hourly rate. So that may help with that balance in terms of when you can bring them back up or so forth. So that's what we have now. There's been a tremendous amount of advocacy by several agencies, several stakeholders. There have been a lot of senators and congressional reps that have written to all the government agencies asking them to address the immigration issues. And hopefully something will come out soon. So for everybody on the call, reach out to your congressional reps and encourage that advocacy for all the foreign nationals here that can benefit from those efforts.
Right.
Yes.
And it's always good to look at if they have a dual type of status. So let's say you've got someone who's on an H-1B, but they also have adjustment pending, and they have their EAD in hand. If you have the EAD, that gives you a lot more flexibility.
Right.
The employment authorization document. That's going to give you huge flexibility. But really the most difficult statuses to play with, anything with the LCA, whether it's an E3, H-1B, H-1B1, you know, any of those, it's going to be a challenge.
Okay. If you both could quickly touch upon EADs and also F1s, J1s, Hamel, if you could also touch upon those, that would be great. So,
you know, as we mentioned, the routine services, USCIS, they suspended them until May 3rd. So they're working behind the scenes, as they mentioned, and they're using the biometrics that they have on file for extension of EAD. So applicants who had an appointment after March 18th, or who had filed the application for employment authorization, the extension, they are using the biometrics that they have on file.
So they're still processing the EADs, correct?
That's right. They are still processing them. If you're on an F1 OPT, they don't require biometrics. So they are adjudicating those. One thing that's also that I had, well, not I, but one of our students had some success with was actually calling USCIS, that number, and asking them to expedite. This particular person was going to medical school, and he called on a Wednesday asking them to expedite. And I want to say on the Friday, he received an email because he had signed up for the email notice, and that they had actually approved the EAD based on his request. So there are some people out there behind the scenes doing some good. it doesn't hurt to dial that 1-800 number, and the USCIS has the discretion, right? They have the discretion to expedite petitions. It can be based on humanitarian grounds, if there's a not-for-profit, if it's to the benefit of the United States, if there's going to be severe business loss. So they have those options to exercise that discretion. If you're calling them, asking them to expedite something, have your points ready for discussion over the phone. They may tell you, okay, that's great, call back in 15 days. They may ask you to send in proof of that. At this point, if there's so many things at stake, it doesn't hurt to turn over all the stones possible. But the good news is they are working behind the scenes. Hopefully May 3rd, when things open up, people will be able to go in to have biometrics done that they may not have been able to do so before, or they will come up with some mechanism to allow people, to allow them to extend their EADs. I'm not sure what they're going to come up with, but May 3rd is a really important date for many people to see where they're going to go with that.
Okay, excellent. Did you want to add in anything else about F1s, if they need to apply for any hardship EADs, or anything else with J1s?
Well, are you talking about you mean J2 EADs?
Right.
Right. Well, J2 EADs should never have a hardship to apply for because they're just a beneficiary here. An F1 student to apply for an EAD based on economic hardship, it's discretionary. They can certainly do so. The student should speak to their international office. Every school has an ICE liaison, because ICE is the agency that oversees all the F1s. And the ICE liaison works very closely with the designated school officials, and they can escalate where needed, and they can also provide guidance if there's a lack of clarity. I'll share on the chat it's an excellent resource. It's Study in the United States, Study in the US, and they've been updating a lot of COVID related questions. I used to look at it every day, and it's a tremendous resource. So I'll share that with the group.
In the interest of time, I was hoping that we could actually now direct the questions to more of the family immigration questions, just so we can to hit some really heavy hitting topics, and we can come back to, if we have any employer related questions, we can tackle them towards the end. Is that okay with the team?
That's sure. I wanted to just quickly mention I-9s.
Yes.
They just real quick, this was a really beautiful gift, which seldom comes from DHS, that they waived the physical presence requirement. For those of you who don't know, the I-9 is for employment eligibility verification, and every employer is required to fill this out when they have a new hire in the United States. And so the employer is required to review it physically, and since that's not possible, they've allowed you to accept a scanned emailed copy of the document, and then the employer is required to follow up in person once normal business resumes within 3 business days with the original document. So that was a huge relief. I personally was very relieved because we have many people that come through our doors. So that was a very nice adjustment that they made.
Excellent, thank you. We also have a question from the community about renewing of visas, and I think that's a nice segue, Pallvi, if you wanted to take the lead on addressing how non-immigrants can actually extend their visas from the comforts of their home, and then also direct our attention to DACA and TPS and the status of that, of those two.
Okay. Yeah, so like we said before, USCIS some offices have been closing, but they are still processing. They are taking longer to process, but it is being done. And as we've been saying throughout, this is a very weird situation. So document. What I've been doing personally for my clients is I've been sending in applications postmarked, so I know that they are sent in. They have been submitted, and whenever they get processed, they'll get processed. That's what we're being told to continue doing, is to continue sending applications in.
So this is also for tourist visas that they apply the I-539 online, and they're able to then at least have a receipt notice that they have applied for this extension.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm submitting proof of again, proof as in the form of, if my client, I had a client who was not necessarily ill, but she's elderly and doesn't want to travel, and during this time, which obviously she's allowed to make that decision. So we've been submitting, for people like that, submitting articles showing, the dangers of traveling, the dangers of certain age groups, statistics from her country where she would be going in our country or her area where she lives. All of this can be considered quote unquote proof to be submitted with the application. And that's the best way, I would say, if you're trying to extend or renew your visas, is to just document everything and try to postmark as much as possible. If it's submitted, I can't imagine that they would come after you for anything.
So I know we are going to address the public charge issue, but if you could talk a little bit about DACA and temporary protected status, that would be excellent.
Okay, so for TPS, applicants can continue with their status. It has been, if you have a work permit in hand, you can continue working. If your job has laid you off, you can, like I said before, apply for unemployment benefits, but keep a good relationship with your boss. Again, document everything, because you may come up in a situation with public charge where you have to prove that it was due to COVID-19. As long as you have that proof, it should work. It shouldn't be a big deal. DACA applicants, actually today I heard something that they're talking about allowing new applications. We don't know if that's going to happen, but as of right now, they can renew. Again, submitting them to the lockboxes, and whenever they get processed, they get processed. But you can continue with status quo. I want to mention, VAWA, we said that we're going to put up some resources for people who are in uncomfortable situations. Being in lockdown, is not only necessarily a bad thing because your spouse annoys you. It might be a bad thing for more serious reasons such as you're in an abusive relationship or an unsafe situation. You still have options. Applications can still be submitted. You can still seek help, and now is the time. There's no other excuse right now. You have the time. This is the time to do it. Look for an attorney, look for someone who can help you, and we'll be posting those resources as well. As far as public charge, as I said before.
Sorry, could you just back up and explain public charge so we're all on the same page about public charge?
Yes, I'm sorry about that. I shouldn't have done that. Public charge is one of the new rules that our president came up with that basically states that anybody who takes any government assistance financially will then therefore be questioned when it comes to immigration benefits. I don't want to say blocked from immigration benefits, because if in certain situations you can, such as COVID-19, you can still obtain immigration benefits, but it's just a lot more paperwork and a lot more proof that will be required. So that's why all of these stimulus checks going out, unemployment benefits, it's a big deal to us attorneys because we're worried about our clients who are in dire need and need this money, and we don't want them to come into a situation tomorrow where they're not able to apply for immigration benefits because they needed to get unemployment benefits or they received this check.
So let's just clarify that unemployment benefits do not qualify as public charge. I think the other thing that you mentioned was if we didn't mention it, if you need to go for testing, that does not qualify for public charge. So everyone should be able to, who can get tested, can go get tested. And if you're seeking unemployment benefits and you have a lawful way to get unemployment benefits, that should not bar you from the public charge, correct?
Yes. Also, if you do test positive and need to therefore access medical benefits in that way, that also will be excused from public charge.
Okay, excellent.
As long as you can prove that you were tested positive.
Okay. Do we have any, did you want to put any other insights on public charge?
Not in public charge. If there's any questions, I'm trying to keep up with the chat as I'm talking. It's really hard.
How about the stimulus that came out? Does that have any impact on also, again, accessing this public charge?
So we discussed this, the panelists and I believe you were in that call yesterday as well. We kind of went over this. From all of my research, the only issue that it is that some people are receiving stimulus checks when they're not necessarily eligible. Now, if you're not eligible and you receive that stimulus check, it is on you, according to the IRS, to figure out a way to return it to them. And honestly, I would say return it. It's not worth keeping that money now and dealing with them later on as far as immigration is concerned and the government is concerned. We cannot stop them from putting it into your account, but people are making mistakes. So if you receive a check and you know that you're not eligible, then definitely contact the IRS and figure out a way to return it. You can look up who is eligible for the stimulus check. I believe we could probably put up a website. I could look one up as well.
So I put it in the CRS report, the Congressional Research Service. So for anyone that joined late in the chat, you can save it, and there's a lot of links. So that is there.
And I wanted to add, it kind of piggybacking off of what Pallvi said. There are also people that are posing as government officials that want your information to send you a check. Unfortunately, that is not true. So if there are people that are receiving phone calls and are asking for personal information, it's a scam. So to also be mindful about that. It's unfortunate that people are doing that during this time and exploiting folks with that type of activity. So that's, I'll send a link of where people can report that. Also, Social Security office is closed. They're only doing some things over the phone. We don't know when they're going to be open again. So if there are people that need a Social Security number, they're new here, that's going to, become an issue as well. There's been conversation about allowing people to at least apply online. I don't know how far that's come along, but that is being considered.
And haven't certain states, correct me if I'm wrong, but haven't certain states allowed for state funding for their own individual stimulus if they're undocumented immigrants? Is that anybody else's understanding?
There is, but I mean, there's a lot of fine print. So I think before accepting is to reiterate what Pallvi said, just be very careful, because for the, it's very difficult, but everyone's going through a really tough time.
Yeah.
And, it would be so helpful to some people, but the, cost benefit analysis, which is very difficult because, this is a very heart-rendering situation where people could really, really do with the money, but on the other hand, this could ruin their chances to adjust their status or become documented. So, there's plenty of nonprofit. If you can't go to an attorney, there's plenty of nonprofits who can advise people on the best course of action too.
We've had a question about VAWA applicants that they either have or don't have work permits. Can they apply for these stimulus checks? I think this is something that we would have to look into the actual CARES, the CRS report that you have up there, and get back to you.
Yeah, it really would depend on a case-by-case situation, right? We would have to look into whether or not they were present last year, they filed taxes, what their income level was, and then we could go through that.
Okay. Can we, we're going to hit naturalization and the impact also on adjustment of status to round out our power hour.
Okay, so if you're waiting for an interview, I've had several people who had interviews scheduled during this complete shutdown. Yeah, for naturalization, it's being extended. You will get a letter. I'm telling people, I'm calling the 1-800 number at least once a day for each one of my clients, just to double check and make sure that there are no updates. If you don't have an attorney, then unfortunately that falls on you. You need to call the 1-800 number that I think Neena or Hamel put up earlier. Just call the 1-800 number and see if there's any updates. I don't think there will be any, because according to what I've read, they're not going to be doing anything until at least May 2nd or 3rd. After that, it might even get extended because some states are still in lockdown. New York is extended till May 15th. So I'm not sure even after that they're gonna open.
But if they've signed up for USCIS online, they've filed N-400 through online portal, they can get notification that way as well.
Yes, they can get notification. You can check online as well. Also, they could send you emails, updates. It really depends on how you filled out the application. But if you haven't done any of that and it was just a paper and pen application, the 1-800 number is your best friend. And I would put it on speed dial and call once a day just to be safe. That's what I would do. And any new applications, again, like I said, since USCIS is working, they're working slowly, but they are working. Just submit them to Lockbox, and they'll get to them when they get to them. You have proof that it was submitted. Same thing with adjustment of status.
Okay, I think one of the other questions was about adjustment of status. If there's a green card holder who's being sponsored, or a spouse who is a U.S. citizen, who should apply for benefits? And I'm guessing unemployment benefits at this point. The U.S. citizen is in a better position.
It would be the U.S. citizen, yes.
But actually, in that case, I mean, they're both protected class. So, you know, if it's just unemployment benefits, you know, they both can. Another thing that I think has come up is with so many employers applying for the PPP, and which is the Paycheck Protection Program, which all seems to have gone to, like, you know, 3 companies. But, you know, if your employer is paying you through that, that doesn't affect your immigration status.
Right.
That's your employer who has requested that funding, and they're entitled to that. To flip back to naturalization, I would encourage people, you don't have to apply on paper. We have been e-filing this for as long as you've been able to e-file. This is the one opportunity that, like, it's really, you can take advantage of e-filing. Nats. There's all, you know, if there's anything you need to explain or any statements that you need to make, you can upload it. I mean, I would definitely
take advantage of it for sure.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. The N400 online, it can be a little bit onerous. There's help out there, but it really does behoove you to proceed with an e-filing request, to e-file N400.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad that you mentioned that. So just as a complete disclaimer, if there's anything that you can do online in this time and day and age, definitely do it online, because again, that's much more proof and it's much better than snail mail. But if there's stuff that you cannot send through online, yeah, still send it in through mail.
So I noticed somebody asked they have an EAD and they're waiting for an interview since December. It depends where you are. If you're in New York, if you have you know, first of all, December's not that long.
New Jersey. Yeah, it's just, you have to just sit tight.
It's under normal circumstances, it's 8-9 months. Yeah. So I would relax for a bit. Nothing's happening.
when you're coming on a year and then you're worried.
Yeah. You're actually in a really good position. If you have your EAD, like, the interview will come. Spend this time gathering evidence. Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing, is that this is like kind of a blessing in disguise to a lot of practitioners, because it's giving us time to, one, reach out to our clients. They're home. They have nothing better to do than go digging for evidence for us. Right?
Yeah. And so just keeping in the interest of time, if we have any other questions, if you wanted to go ahead and type that into the group chat, that would be great. I think we covered the topics that, I know it was pretty rapid fire, but we wanted to cover a large variety of our population that we deal with, and see if there's, hopefully we covered a little bit of everything. If there were certain things that you didn't understand, we're happy to go through.
The one thing I didn't cover, sorry, that I think was under my purview, is CAP H-1Bs. So they did actually, you know, even though it was like right in the middle of this, I was going to say something storm, but you know, they did actually run the registrations and people did get selected. So even though this has no end in sight just yet, you still have to get those H-1Bs filed by 30th of June if you are selected.
What happens in terms of start date in terms of these types of situations?
So a couple things. One is, I mean, the start date will still be October 1st for, you know, a cap case. The part that I think we're going to have issues with is the cap gap people, or the people who are going to consular process. And so it's going to be up to each individual applicant. They may need to file a B, you know, to stay in status in the US, and then file a change of status again prior to October 1st, because we don't know if the consulates are going to open. So, you know, this is, you know, it's not great, but in the circumstances, you know, the fact that 30th of June is a little ways away, I mean, you can set up your I-129 forms to do a change of status in country if you had been considering doing consular processing and maybe rejigging it there.
Okay, if we have no further questions at this time, I know this is recorded, so Rohit, will folks get a copy of this recording, or will it be available on SABANY's website?
Yes, once the session's over, the link will be provided on the SABANY website as well as the LinkedIn page. And again, members are encouraged to put, you know, copy and paste that on their own social media pages.
Okay, thank you. I think it's been an honor to be on the panel with all of you, and we hope that this has been of some use to you. I know this is a difficult time for us all, and so if we can work together, if there's any way that we as a community can support our fellow brothers and sisters in the South Asian community, we'd love to be able to do so. I know we're getting one or two additional questions. I don't know if anybody from the team wants to take this last question. Otherwise, we can wrap up and email him directly.
Well, I think I can say that premium processing has been suspended, so don't wait for anything. I think we said it earlier, but just to reiterate, if you have a visa that's expiring towards the end of the year, let's say October, November, December, start now. There's, you know, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know, you know, even if everything started up again tomorrow, they're still going to be dealing with backlog.
There's going to be a lot of backlog. You can only apply for your renewal 6 months prior to the expiration of your current status, for example, for the H1. So you can start now if it.
Yeah, but you can file 6 months in advance, but you can start the preparation.
Absolutely.
8 or 9 months in advance. Yeah.
Well, thank you to the team. We hope you found it very helpful. And if we can serve the community any further, we'd be happy to do so. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
We're just hanging out.